The night was swollen with rain, the city's alleys running like open wounds where the water mixed with grime and blood. Mara moved quickly, clutching her coat tighter as she cut through a narrow passage she had walked 100 times before. Tonight felt different, though. The air pulsed with a low, unnatural hum, like a heartbeat buried beneath the concrete. Halfway down the alley, she froze. Something shifted in the shadows, a low growl, wet and ragged, carried by the wind. At first, she thought it was just another starving stray, but then she saw the glint. Two eyes burned from the darkness, not with the dull reflection of streetlights, but with their own faint luminescence. Greenish and alive in a way that unsettled her. The dog emerged. Its fur was matted with mud and streaks of blood, some of it its own, some not. A gash along its flank leaked dark fluid onto the pavement, and each step left a smear behind. Yet despite its wounds, it held itself with a strange defiance, as if it belonged here more than she did. Mara's first instinct was to back away, but the hum in the ground intensified. The closer the creature came, the sound seemed tethered to it, resonating from deep within its body. Her fear gave way to an unsettling pull, a sense that something beyond her understanding was woven into this animal. When the dog collapsed at her feet, the wet slap of its body hitting the ground made her flinch. Blood spread slowly beneath it, mixing with rainwater in a crimson halo. Its chest heaved, breath rattling as though it fought to hold on to something far greater than life itself. Mara crouched, compelled not by pity but by an inexplicable certainty that this moment mattered. Her hand hovered over the creature's neck, hesitant, trembling. The fur was hot, almost feverish, as if energy surged beneath the skin. She could feel the vibration of that alien hum radiating into her bones. When its glowing eyes locked onto hers, there was no fear in them, only a terrible, knowing intelligence. The world around her seemed to shiver, the rain slowing, the air thickening. In that instant, Mara realized she had not found a dying stray at all. The dog had found her, and with its blood soaking into her hands, something irreversible had already begun. The storm had thinned to a cold drizzle, but the alley still smelled of rust and blood. Mara remained crouched over the dog, her fingers stained with its life. She expected its breathing to fade, for its body to grow still. But instead, the creature's chest convulsed with a violent shudder. Its eyes snapped open again, burning brighter than before, emerald fire cutting through the dark. They weren't the eyes of a dog. Mara felt it immediately. An intelligence pressing against her mind, alien and suffocating. Images flooded her head without sound or voice. Endless black skies, fractured landscapes, towering machines drenched in smoke and blood. Each vision was a shard of some distant war, sharp enough to split her thoughts. She gasped, clutching her skull as warm liquid ran down her nose. Blood. The dog lifted its head. Despite its torn flesh and shattered ribs, its gaze pinned her to the alley floor. Those eyes were not pleading, nor animal they commanded. The hum that had haunted the ground in Chapter 1 rose into a piercing resonance, vibrating through her teeth and bones until she thought they might crack. She wanted to run, but her legs refused. Dog's pupils dilated unnaturally wide, swallowing the green fire until only two black voids stared back at her. Something within them moved, shapes shifting like silhouettes trapped beneath glass. For one breathless second, Mara thought she saw a face inside those eyes, elongated, hollow-cheeked, with teeth too sharp to belong to anything human. The rainwater around them rippled, not from the weather, but from the force spilling outward from the dog. The pool of its blood thickened unnaturally, climbing in rivulets along the brick walls, as though gravity had lost meaning. Mara staggered back, her hand slipping through the wet pavement. When she looked down, her palm was coated in a slick, metallic substance, more black than red, and it burned against her skin. The dog coughed, hacking up fluid darker than oil, spattering the alley in a spray that steamed where it touched stone. Yet it refused to collapse again. Instead, its eyes held her captive. And then impossibly they shifted, not just in color or shape, but in depth. They expanded outward, wide enough that Mara felt herself leaning into them, as though she were staring through windows into a sky that wasn't hers. For a heartbeat, the alley dissolved. She was elsewhere, standing on a battlefield of broken towers and rivers of blood not her own. Shadows moved among carcasses of machines larger than mountains. In the distance, she saw the same eyes, multiplied by thousands, staring back at her across that wasteland. When she blinked, the vision was gone. The alley returned. The dog lay trembling at her feet, its body still broken, but its gaze unrelenting. Mara fell backward into the filth, chest heaving, heart hammering. She understood one thing. The creature she had touched was no stray, no accident. It had shown her what it carried inside. And it was bleeding out not just into her hands, but into her life. And whatever it was alive inside her now. Mara did not sleep that night. She couldn't. She had dragged the bleeding dog from the alley into her crumbling apartment on the 5th floor, leaving a trail of black-red streaks up the stairwell that no one noticed or dared to question. The rain had washed most of the mess from the streets, but her clothes still clung to her, soaked in the creature's fluid that burned against her skin in patches. Her veins itched as if something had slipped into them, something foreign. The dog lay on a torn blanket near the radiator, its ribs shuddering with every breath. Blood pooled beneath it, thick and tar-like, spreading wider despite the fact that such a wound should have drained it long ago. Yet the animal refused to die. Its eyes remained half open, glowing faintly in the dim apartment, watching her as though guarding or judging. At first, Mara thought the pounding in her skull was from exhaustion, but as the city outside settled into silence, the pounding sharpened into something else. A rhythm. Not her heartbeat, not the dog's ragged breaths. It was distant, metallic, deliberate, signal. It echoed in her head, pulsing in patterns, 3 short bursts, 2 long, then silence. Again. She pressed her palms to her ears, but it wasn't sound. It was inside her. The walls of the apartment groaned as the radiator hissed and sputtered. Shadows stretched unnaturally long across the room. Not once, not twice, but in sync with the pulses in her skull. The dog twitched violently, as if struck by electricity. Its jaws snapped open, spilling a spray of black blood across the floorboards. The liquid writhed like it was alive, spreading in thin, branching lines that seared themselves into the wood. Mara watched, frozen, as the lines began to take shape. Geometric, deliberate, forming symbols she couldn't read but instinctively knew weren't human. The hum from the alley returned, stronger now, vibrating through the building's foundations. A glass on her counter shattered. Across the street, windows flickered with failing power. Mara's vision blurred, and for a moment she saw beyond the room. She saw rooftops, antennas bending unnaturally toward her building, satellites above shuddering in their orbit as if dragged by some invisible tether. The signal was calling, and she was the receiver. The dog raised its head, eyes wide open now, glowing like twin emerald beacons. Its chest convulsed as though forcing air into lungs that no longer worked. Then, with a guttural wheeze, it expelled another mouthful of fluid. This time the blood sprayed across the wall, painting it in chaotic arcs. When the liquid settled, Mara's breath caught because among the random streaks, one shape was clear, a circle, within it, an eye. Watching, her nose bled again. Her ears rang with the signal's sharp, pulsing code. Her body shook as though something deep inside her had been switched on, lined with the dog's suffering and the alien frequency binding them both. The dog collapsed once more, trembling in silence. But Mara could no longer pretend this was an injured stray. It was a transmitter. Its wounds, its blood, even its breath, everything it exhaled was a message waiting for her to decode. And somewhere in the night, beyond the city and the sky itself, someone or something was listening. The signal had not stopped. Even after the blood-etched symbols dried into black scars on her floor, the rhythm still pulsed inside Mara's skull, like an infection, like a countdown. The dog had fallen still again, its breathing shallow, its body trembling in intervals that matched the signal. But something had changed. Around its neck, half hidden beneath the matted fur, something gleamed. Mara hadn't noticed it before, but now the shimmer drew her eyes like a knife catching the light. She reached for it hesitantly, brushing aside clumps of blood-stiffened hair. Her fingers touched cold metal, impossibly smooth, unmarred by rust or dirt. It was a collar, but unlike anything forged on Earth. The surface shifted as she looked at it, dark one moment, mirror bright the next. Symbols pulsed faintly along its edge, the same as those carved in blood on her floor. Her stomach knotted. The collar was humming with the signal, alive beneath her fingertips. The moment she pressed harder, the dog convulsed. Its jaws split open in a grotesque snarl, not of defiance, but of pain. More of that viscous black blood spilled across the blanket, soaking her hands, burning her skin where it touched. Mara screamed, pulling back, but the collar's glow intensified, as if reacting to her. The room itself began to twist. Light bent at impossible angles, stretching shadows across the walls until they became fissures, cracks into a void beyond. The radiator shrieked, metal groaning, as though the whole building was buckling under unseen weight. And then the collar unlocked. It didn't snap or break. It unfolded, petals of metal peeling back like the bloom of a mechanical flower. From within, strands of liquid light spilled out, lashing against the air. They didn't illuminate the room so much as carve into it, leaving seared lines where they touched. One strand coiled around Mara's wrist before she could recoil. It didn't just hold her, entered her. Agony flared through her arm, racing to her chest. Her blood surged in rebellion, veins burning as though filled with molten iron. She saw flashes again, skies torn open by fire, colossal machines ripping into flesh, rivers running black with bodies that weren't human. And over it all, an eye always watching, always waiting. The dog howled then, a sound too deep, too resonant to belong to its body. The collar had become a conduit, and through it the creature poured out not just blood but memory, essence, command. Mara collapsed to her knees, vomit and blood spilling from her mouth onto the floorboards. Her vision blurred, but she saw enough the collar's glow sinking into her skin, etching faint, foreign symbols along her arm. They burned like fresh wounds, like ownership. When she looked at the dog again, it was no longer just an animal. Its gaze was ancient, alien, heavy with something that had survived far beyond its body's limits. Its blood pooled thicker, spreading outward until it touched the etched circle on the floor. And when the two connected, the blood and the collar, something stirred. Not in the room, not in the city, but in the night sky above. Something had heard. Something was coming. The collar had fused into her skin. Even after she scrubbed her arm raw beneath scalding water, the glowing marks remained burned into her veins like molten tattoos. Each symbol pulsed faintly, in rhythm with something not her own. By the time dawn broke, Mara had not closed her eyes once. The dog still lay on the floor, surrounded by its own thick, tar-like blood. But its chest rose and fell with a stubborn cadence. Its wounds should have killed it hours ago. Instead, the air around it vibrated with a sick resonance, as if its presence alone warped the silence. And then the voices began. They came without warning, threading through her skull with a clarity that defied sense. Not sound, but meaning. 1,000 whispers woven into one, their tones shifting between metallic rasp and hollow echoes, dripping into her consciousness like a poison. "We see you." She staggered back, pressing her hands over her ears, though the voices weren't there. The marks on her arm glowed brighter, reacting with every phrase. "You carry the signal. You carry the wound." Her stomach lurched. She bent forward and vomited across the floor. The bile mixed with streaks of red, too thick to be stomach acid alone. Her nose bled freely, dripping into the mess. The voices didn't falter. They grew stronger, feeding on her weakness. The dog lifted its head then, its eyes igniting once more with that alien green. Its jaws parted, and what poured out wasn't a growl, but a vibration, a tone that matched the voices in her head. The blood on the floor rippled, spreading outward in concentric waves, as though gravity itself bent around the sound. She realized with terror that the messages were not random. They were coordinates, instructions, commands, but only she could hear them. No radio crackled, no screen flickered, just her skull, her blood, her burning veins. She tried to resist, but resistance was futile. The more she fought, the louder they became, pressing behind her eyes until tears of blood streaked down her cheeks. She clawed at her temples, nails breaking skin, leaving crimson crescents along her face. Still the voices remained. "Now you are chosen, your vessel, you are door." Her vision doubled, the room tilting, as if the floor had dissolved beneath her. The symbols burned hotter, searing pain through her bones. She could hear the city outside sirens in the distance, footsteps echoing in stairwells, but muffled, drowned beneath the alien chorus now dictating her every breath. The dog lurched forward, dragging its broken body closer, smearing blood in thick streaks across her floorboards, collapsed against her legs, its warmth feverish, its body vibrating like a machine rather than flesh. Its eyes locked on hers, and the voices converged into one final unified command. Open the way. Her body convulsed violently, as though something inside her wanted out. Blood spilled from her mouth in a torrent, spattering her chest, the floor, the animal at her knees. But the dog did not recoil. It bathed in the spray, its wounds knitting faintly, its eyes brighter than ever. Mara realized the truth with a shudder. The dog was feeding on her blood, her mind, her very sanity. And in return, it was preparing her. Because the messages weren't just hers to hear. They were hers to deliver. By nightfall, the city was no longer safe for Mara. The whispers hadn't stopped since the collar fused to her skin. They clawed at her mind in an endless stream of coordinates warnings. To Manzan now they pulsed with a new urgency. Run, they are coming. She hadn't known who they were until she saw the first black van slide to a halt across the street. No markings, no lights. Just men in dark gear spilling out like shadows given form. Their helmets glowed faintly with scanners, eyes sweeping through her windows. The signal had drawn them. The dog's blood had called them, and now she was their quarry. Mara grabbed the trembling animal, though its weight was dead-like, its body soaked in its own dark fluid. As she lifted it, the collar burned hotter, searing her flesh. She screamed, but didn't stop. She couldn't. The door splintered behind her, boots pounding the stairwell. She bolted through the hallway, the dog pressed against her chest, leaving a trail of blood across the cracked plaster walls. The whispers inside her head screamed directions, unnatural. Impossible ones turned left into walls that weren't there, leap where no stairs existed, sprint through corridors that bent unnaturally. Yet when she obeyed, the world itself seemed to fold, guiding her past the shadows that pursued. But they were fast. Too fast. The first shot rang out, a muffled burst from a silenced rifle. The wall beside her exploded in plaster and dust. Mara stumbled, the dog howling in her arms, its blood spraying in fresh arcs across her face. She hit the fire escape, feet slipping on the wet metal rungs. The alley below reeked of rain, trash, and iron. She descended too quickly, her skin ripping on the rusted edges, leaving bloody smears in her wake. Above, the men poured onto the roof, their visors glowing green as they locked onto her. The voices inside her roared, "Run, faster, bleed if you must." She crashed into the street, clutching the dog tighter, lungs burning. The city lights warped around her, neon signs bending and flickering in unison with the signal in her head. Cars screeched as she darted between them, horns blaring, headlights cutting sharp beams into her vision. Behind her, the shadows followed, unrelenting, weapons raised. And then the blood began to betray her. Every step she took left a crimson mark, her body leaking from nose, mouth, and the glowing wounds etched into her arm. She was a beacon in the dark, a living trail impossible to hide. The dog writhed suddenly, snarling with inhuman force. Its collar flared bright, sending out a shockwave that cracked street lamps and shattered glass. The men pursuing staggered, some collapsing as their visors short-circuited. Mara nearly dropped the animal as the shock rolled through her bones, but she clung tighter. The voices shifted again, urgent, commanding. The station, the tower. Follow the blood. Her legs moved without thought, carrying her deeper into the maze of the city. The alleys narrowed, the buildings leaned close, the air heavy with smoke and rain. The men were still behind, her silent, disciplined, a wall of death that did not tire. Her vision blurred, the world tilting. Her own blood smeared across her shirt. Her arms the dog pressed against her chest. She felt hollow, drained, every drop of herself spilling onto the streets. Yet the whispers refused to let her fall. Not yet, they hissed. You are vessel, you are door. And as she ran into the depths of the city, with death at her heels and alien blood on her hands, Mara realized the truth. This chase wasn't meant to save her. It was meant to lead her. Mara didn't remember collapsing. One moment, she was sprinting through alleys with boots and bullets behind her. The next, she was strapped to a steel table, her wrists bound in restraints slick with her own blood. The air was cold and antiseptic, buzzing with fluorescent lights that made her skin look corpse pale. The dog was gone. Her body trembled with fever, every vein alight with fire. The symbols burned brighter than ever, glowing beneath her skin, as though her flesh had become translucent. She could feel them shifting, crawling upward, embedding themselves deeper into her marrow. Figures in lab coats circled her, their faces hidden behind masks and shields. Instruments gleamed needles, scalpels, saws. They didn't whisper, they spoke in clipped clinical tones, as though she weren't human at all. Foreign sequences replicating. Blood viscosity abnormal, cellular integrity collapsing, reforming. She writhed against the restraints, screaming, but her voice broke into wet, choking gasps. Blood surged up her throat, spilling past her lips in thick black ropes. It burned her chest as it escaped, and when it hit the steel table, it hissed like acid, eating tiny pits into the surface. The scientists recoiled, but not with fear, with fascination. They cut her, not to harm but to study. A scalpel slicing across her forearm, revealing flesh that didn't behave like flesh anymore. The skin parted, but instead of red tissue, strands of metallic light pulsed beneath, weaving in and out of her muscle like wires. They glowed with the same rhythm as the voices in her head. One scientist muttered, almost reverently, "Integration complete. Human genome overwritten." Her scream rattled the room, but it wasn't just hers anymore. It carried another resonance, deeper, layered, as if something inside her screamed with her. The lights flickered, glass beakers shattered. Her blood sprayed across their gowns, burning holes in the fabric, searing their skin to blistering boils. They backed away, but not far enough. The restraints snapped not from her strength alone, but from the force of her body, rejecting confinement. The symbols along her skin blazed white-hot, veins splitting open as streams of blood erupted from her arms and chest. The crimson spray hung in the air for a moment, forming jagged shapes. The same alien runes she had seen burned into her floor, and then the dog's voice filled her mind, not barking, not growling. Words, "You are no longer separate. You are becoming." Her body convulsed. Skin tore along her spine, exposing bone that wasn't bone anymore, elongated, ridged, almost insectoid. Blood poured from the wound, coating the table, dripping onto the floor, where it writhed like living serpents. Her DNA was mutating in real time, each cell bending to something older, something unearthly. The scientists didn't flee. They recorded even as their boots hissed in the corrosive pools of her blood. They whispered phrases she couldn't process, but their eyes gleamed with awe. She realized in her haze of agony that they weren't trying to stop what was happening. They had been waiting for it. Her vision blurred, her body broken open and remade. She saw her reflection in a cracked shard of glass on the floor, eyes glowing green. Teeth sharpened, veins pulsing with light instead of blood. The human Mara was dissolving. Something else was taking her place. And in the shadows of the lab, beyond the flickering lights, the dog watched silently, its wounds now closed, its body whole, again fed by her suffering, reborn through her transformation. The lab was no longer silent. Sirens screamed from every wall, red strobes pulsing in rhythm with the alien symbols burning beneath Mara's skin. The scientists who had been dissecting her were gone, some fled. Others dissolved into melted heaps where her blood had touched them. The smell of charred flesh and iron filled the air, thick enough to choke. Mara staggered from the table, her body trembling, half human, half something else. Every step left smears of blood that hissed against the floor. She clutched her chest, but there was no stopping it. Her veins glowed like molten circuits, branching across her skin in grotesque patterns. The whispers in her head no longer came only from the dog. New voices had joined, deeper, commanding, resonating like signals bouncing between satellites. They weren't just speaking to her, they were speaking through her. Beyond the lab doors, boots thundered. This wasn't the same squad that had chased her through the city. These steps were heavier, measured a phalanx of soldiers who knew exactly what awaited them. Their helmets bore insignias, their weapons pulsed with faint blue light, tools built for something beyond human warfare. The agency had arrived. The dog stood in the corner of the ruined lab, its once wounded body whole again, watching without flinching. Its collar gleamed faintly, in sync with the symbols across Mara's arm. She realized with horror that they were linked now, just bonded, but dependent. Its healing was drawn from her pain. Survival bled through her veins. The first blast tore the lab doors from their hinges. Smoke and sparks filled the air, followed by a flood of armored figures. Their visors glowed crimson as they raised their weapons. Mara's heart pounded, but before she could move, one of the soldiers spoke not to her, but into a comms device clipped to his collar. Target secured. Subject Alpha has integrated. Prepare for containment. Subject Alpha, her. Mara screamed, not in fear, but in fury. Bullets tore through the smoke. They weren't normal rounds. They glowed, hissing like burning phosphorus as they struck her skin. Pain seared through her, yet instead of piercing flesh, the projectiles dissolved into her body, feeding the fire in her blood. Convulsed, veins bulging, eyes blazing brighter than ever. The whispers inside her head roared, drowning her thoughts. Do not flee. Become. Show them what you are, her body responded. Skin split along her arms, ribs cracking open with sickening snaps. Blood sprayed across the soldiers, sizzling through their armor, burning through visors. Screams filled the lab, human voices twisting into gurgles as faces melted beneath the corrosive torrent. The walls dripped red and black. Still more poured in. The agency was relentless, disciplined, unafraid of sacrifice. Each death seemed calculated, as though they wanted to push her limits, to measure the scope of what she was becoming. The dog moved then, stepping forward through the carnage. Barked once short, sharpened. The sound was not a bark at all. It was a command, a frequency. The soldiers froze mid-step, clutching their helmets as blood sprayed from their ears. Mara fell to her knees, shaking, blood dripping from her eyes, her mouth, her hands. She felt her humanity slip further, eaten away by whatever had been seated inside her. But in the chaos, she understood something terrible. The agency had known about the dog. They had been waiting for it. And worse, they had been waiting for her. The lab was no longer a room, it was a slaughterhouse. The floor ran slick with blood, pooling beneath the twitching remains of armored soldiers. Some had been torn apart by Mara's hands, others dissolved by the corrosive streams pouring from her veins. The air stank of iron and burning circuits, of flesh that wasn't meant to die this way. Mara stood swaying, her body a battlefield between what she had been and what she was becoming. Strips of skin hung from her arms, her chest split where the alien veins pulsed like living cables, glowing red and violet. Her jaw clenched against the whispers, but they swelled louder, an orchestra of commands she could not resist. The dog stepped forward through the carnage. Its fur shimmered now, no longer dull, but threaded with faint streaks of silver, like starlight woven into flesh. The collar glowed brighter, synchronizing with the veins beneath Mara's skin. For a moment, the world held its breath, and then the roof tore open. The agency's machines descended from the night sky, black vessels shaped like daggers, edges burning with plasma. Their engines thundered, rattling the ruins, sending shards of concrete and glass raining down. Mara shielded her face as soldiers rappelled from the crafts above, their rifles already glowing with rounds designed for her flesh. She staggered back, but the dog barked a deep, resonant note that split the air like a detonator. The collar pulsed, and suddenly, Mara felt the pull. Not gravity, but something deeper. Her blood screamed, her body arching as invisible threads hooked into her bones and dragged her upward. The agency fired. Bolts of blue seared into her body, ripping open wounds that spilled rivers of molten red blood. The pain was unbearable, but it no longer crippled her. It propelled her. Each strike ignited the veins inside her, fusing blood and fire until she became a flare rising through the debris. Her screams echoed across the night as she ascended, half carried by the alien power coursing through her, half dragged by the dog's command. Soldiers clung to ropes trying to bring her down, but when her blood splashed against them, their bodies ignited midair, falling like burning meteors into the wreckage below. The sky split open above her. Beyond the clouds, the vessels hung in formation, no longer human crafts, but something older, darker. Their surfaces shimmered with symbols that matched the ones carved into Mara's flesh. They weren't just hunting her, they were calling her. Her body convulsed as the pull intensified. Her spine cracked, ribs shattering outward with sprays of blood, reshaping into something less human. The dog howled beside her, its body dissolving into streaks of light that coiled around her, binding them together in a shared ascent. The city below shrank, a wound of fire and smoke. Her blood trailed behind her in glowing ribbons, a crimson comet tearing free from Earth. and then silence. The atmosphere gave way to the vast black ocean of space. Her lungs should have collapsed, but the whispers filled her chest instead, sustaining her. The vessels surrounded her, massive, angular, their lights blinking in patterns that matched the rhythm of her heart. The dog's voice was the only clear thought in her head, steady, commanding, ancient. This was always your path. There is no going back. Mara drifted among them, body broken, dripping blood that crystallized into red shards against the void. Earth was gone beneath her. Humanity was gone. Only the stars remained, and the war they promised. The stars bent as if they were only painted on a fragile dome, and Mara's body was the hammer that cracked it. The void split open, tearing like flesh, revealing not the cold emptiness of space, but something hidden, something alive. Her blood trailed behind her, thick streams of red that did not disperse in the vacuum, but coiled into symbols, spirals, and ancient maps. The vessels encircling her pulsed in unison, each glowing slit in their holes opening like an eye. The eyes did not blink. They watched her bleed, as though her agony was a rite of passage. The dog hovered beside her, still a creature of silver light, its shape trembling as if struggling to remain within the limits of a canine form. Its collar burned brighter, the beams cutting through the veil. And then the darkness tore away, not into another starfield, but into a realm layered with impossible geometries. It was not one world, but many, stacked like organs in a corpse. Rivers of molten stone flowed above frozen wastelands. Citadels the size of continents hung upside down, tethered by chains of bone. Oceans boiled upward, raining blood instead of water. And threaded between it all were creatures without names. Their bodies vast, serpentine, their eyes burning with the same light that throbbed in Mara's veins. Her body writhed, bones cracked, muscles tore, her skin splitting in long, wet ribbons. The whispers grew into screams, no longer guiding, but commanding. She vomited blood into the void, and it did not scatter but hardened into red shards that drifted toward the largest of the citadels. The world itself seemed to drink her life. The dog barked once, a sharp sound that made even the vessels recoil. Its eyes blazed like twin stars, and in that moment Mara understood. It was no guardian. It was a warden, ensuring she reached this place alive enough to be used. The citadel opened to them, gates of bone parting with the sound of tendons snapping. Beyond was not architecture, but flesh walls, pulsing, dripping, breathing. The air, though there was no air, reeked of rotten copper. Screams echoed from somewhere deep within, muffled but endless, as if the structure itself was digesting civilizations. Mara was pulled inside, her fingers clawed at the air, nails breaking, blood pouring down her wrists. She wanted to resist, but the alien veins within her tightened like leashes, dragging her further. She collapsed on the slick floor, her blood instantly absorbed, the surface drinking greedily. The walls pulsed harder, and a shiver ran through the entire world. The dog walked beside her calmly, unaffected by the stench or the heat. But its shape was changing now, legs too long, jaw too sharp, eyes too knowing. It was slipping. The creature, it really was, pressed against the fragile disguise, eager to emerge. Around them, the shadows moved. Figures stepped out, humanoid but eyeless, their flesh stretched too thin, their mouths sewn shut. They bled continuously from their seams, dark fluid dripping into the grooves of the floor. Each carried a shard of crystal, glowing red, and when they raised them, Mara felt her blood respond, tugged like a tide toward their command. Her scream echoed through the chamber, mingling with the eternal wailing of the citadel. The dog did not look at her this time. It looked forward, toward the throne of bone and fire at the far end of the hall, where something vast and waiting stirred. The veil was not just a boundary between worlds, it was a prison wall, and Mara had just been delivered to the other side. The throne of bone and fire pulsed like a living heart, sending tremors through the citadel's fleshy walls. Mara's body lay broken on the slick floor, blood draining into the grooves that carried it toward the seat of power. Her chest rose in shallow jerks, ribs cracking audibly as alien veins coiled tighter around her bones. She wanted to crawl away, to rip herself free, but her limbs no longer obeyed. She was nothing more than an offering. And the dog, her stray, her savior, her curse, walked forward, calm, deliberate. The silver shimmer of its fur began to fracture, peeling away like strips of wet skin. Underneath, something else writhed. Its collar pulsed violently, beams cutting into the floor, splitting the flesh beneath them. The sawn-mouthed figures fell to their knees, their bodies shuddering as if in worship. The transformation was not sudden. It was a slow unraveling, a desecration of what Mara once thought was loyalty. The creature's spine elongated, vertebrae snapping upward through its back, each slick with dark fluid. Its legs bent and reformed, no longer canine but jointed at impossible angles. The muzzle tore open wider than bone should allow, splitting into 4 jagged mandibles, lined with teeth that dripped red light instead of saliva. Its eyes were no longer warm, no longer animal. They burned like twin suns, so bright Mara's vision blurred, yet she could not look away. The dog she had cradled in an alley, the dog whose heartbeat had once steadied hers, was gone. In its place stood an ancient predator, a warden of the Vale. Blood poured from Mara's nose and ears as the truth slammed into her. It had never chosen her. She had been marked from the beginning. Her body nothing more than a vessel that the dog known the thing had guided to this prison world. Her veins, her agony, the screams inside her skull, all had been steps in a ritual. The sewn-mouthed figures rose, circling her, shards of crystal raised high. When they drove the blades into their own chests, their bodies burst like overripe fruit, painting the chamber in gore. Their blood streamed toward the creature, feeding it, thickening its monstrous form. The throne of bone shuddered, and something vast within the fire began to stir, answering the sacrifice. Mara tried to crawl, nails tearing from her fingers as she clawed at the pulsing floor, but her body betrayed her. The veins lit up, burning her from the inside out, dragging her back toward the creature. She felt her heart skip, then pound violently, as if syncing with its rhythm. The beast bent low, mandibles dripping. Sound thundered from its chest knot of bark, but a chorus of screams layered into one. The force of it shattered what little strength she had left. Her blood surged out of every wound, floating in the air around her in crimson orbs. The dog inhaled, and the blood obeyed, spiraling into its throat like smoke. She was being consumed alive. Her vision swam, darkness creeping at the edges, yet the whispers inside her refused to let her slip away. You are ours. Through your blood, we return. The last thing she saw before the blackness claimed her was the creature's true body unfolding vast and endless, stretching beyond the chamber its limbs, breaking through walls of bone as though this citadel was only a cage too small for its hunger. The dog she thought she had saved in an alley was never a dog at all. It had saved her, kept her alive only so it could open the door with her flesh. The creature had shed its disguise entirely. What once fit inside the skin of a dog now spanned the citadel, its mandibles gnashing against pillars of bone, its endless limbs puncturing the walls and tearing them apart like parchment. Mara's body lay curled beneath it, bloodless, trembling, yet alive by design. She had not been spared. She had been preserved. The veil shuddered as the beast roared. Its voice was not sound, but memory, blasting visions into Mara's skull. She saw armies marching across worlds she had never known. Soldiers with burning eyes, wings of metal and flesh, carrying blades that bled as they cut. She saw cities turn to ash in seconds, oceans boiled into steam, suns devoured until only husks remained. It was not the first war. It was not the last. It was the same war, fought across eternity, erased from every living mind, so it could be fought again. Each cycle, new vessels were chosen, their blood rewritten to carry the forgotten armies back into existence. And now, it was her turn. The ground beneath her split, rivers of blood erupting upward, as if the world itself bled. From those streams rose figures in armor plated with bone, their faces hidden behind masks fused to their flesh. Their weapons pulsed, dripping gore that hissed as it touched the floor. They saluted the creature, their god. Before turning their eyeless heads to Mara, her veins burned as if boiling oil filled them. She screamed a raw, tearing sound as her spine arched and her body rose against her will. The alien blood within her rewrote itself, pulsing with the rhythm of war drums. Her skin cracked open, light spilling from the wounds. But beneath that light were not organs only, shifting symbols carved into her flesh. She was becoming their banner, their weapon. The first battle began without warning. From beyond the citadel walls came an answering roar, and another army stormed through the breach, creatures of fractured stone and molten fire, their bodies shaped like shattered stars. Their claws raked through the bone-armored soldiers, ripping them apart in sprays of black ichor. The air thickened with screams, both human and inhuman, until sound itself seemed to fracture. Mara stumbled forward, dragged by invisible hands. A spear of blood fused into her grip, forming from her own veins, and before she could resist, her arm thrust forward. The weapon impaled one of the stone beasts, exploding it into shards that cut through both armies alike. Her mouth opened, but the scream that left her was not hers, was theirs. An ancient battle cry dredged up from wars that no longer had names. The citadel quaked with the slaughter. Blood sprayed in arcs, coating walls, pooling at Mara's feet. Severed limbs twitched, still clutching weapons. Soldiers burned alive from within, as veins like hers overtook them, twisting their bodies into grotesque parodies of warriors. The beast above them howled in triumph, drinking in the carnage. Mara, caught in the center, could no longer tell where her body ended and the battlefield began. She struck, she killed, she bled sometimes, her own blood. Sometimes the blood of 1,000 others coursing through her veins. Memories not hers flooded her mind. Victories, defeats, betrayals, endless slaughter. It was the war no one remembered because it was meant to be forgotten, sealed behind the veil, erased from every living mind. But now the cycle had cracked open, and Mara was its vessel, its general, its sacrifice. The citadel burned, drenched in blood and bone, as the armies clashed again in a war that had already been fought 1,000 times. And Mara, drowning in screams, realized the truth. The dog had not changed her life. It had ended it and begun something far worse. The battlefield did not end with the citadel. When the walls collapsed, when the rivers of blood carved a path into the sky, the armies spilled outward, climbing into the black ocean above. Stars bent and tore under their weight, constellations drowning in fire. Mara was dragged with them, veins aflame, her body both commander and weapon. The beast, the thing that had once worn the skin of a dog, hovered above the slaughter like a dark star. Its limbs piercing through worlds, its mandibles dripping molten light. Its roar rippled across the cosmos, summoning fleets of bone-armored vessels. They spilled through rifts in the veil, blotting out galaxies, each ship pulsing like a heart filled with blood. Mara's body burned with every order it gave her. She felt herself rise, arms stretched wide, and the armies obeyed. Thousands moved as one, slicing through the stone-born creatures of fire, cleaving them apart until fragments rained like meteor showers across dead planets. Her blood became their banner, glowing trails across the sky. But in the chaos, she felt it a fracture. Not all soldiers bent willingly. In the shadow of her command, some resisted. Their veins flickered, not fully bound to the creature's will. She saw them falter in their slaughter, weapons trembling as though something inside them screamed against obedience. And among them was one who dared act. A general of bone and ash, towering, its mask fused into its skull, approached her as the battle raged. It bowed low, pretending loyalty, before its blade pierced her side. The weapon did not cut flesh alone. It sliced through the veins glowing within her, severing the alien tether that bound her to the beast. Blood erupted, spraying in long arcs that floated like burning comets. The pain nearly split her consciousness. She fell, clutching the wound, her screams scattering across a dozen starfields at once. For the first time, the armies hesitated. The beast above shrieked, mandibles snapping, its attention breaking from the war. And then the betrayal spread. Dozens of warriors turned their blades inward, slashing at their own ranks. Fleets of bone vessels fired upon one another, ripping through the void with bursts of crimson flame. The forgotten war collapsed into a second conflict, a rebellion within the beast's own forces. Mara drifted, bleeding into space, her body torn but still alive. The general who had stabbed her ripped the mask from its face, revealing eyes human, eyes burning with rage and sorrow. They were not soldiers at all, but prisoners, twisted and remade across endless cycles of war. And now, freed by her blood, they remembered. The beast roared, its body splitting apart into 1,000 writhing limbs, but the armies no longer bowed. Ships turned their cannons on their creator, slicing chunks from its form. The heavens ignited with betrayal, stars themselves shattering under the fury of weapons older than memory. Mara floated between it all, torn open, her veins spilling light into the void. She did not know if she was dying or being remade again, but she knew this. The war no one remembered was unraveling. The dog the beast was no longer in control. The stars themselves bled as the universe became a battlefield of rebellion. And Mara, broken and burning, was its unwilling center. Mara drifted in the wreckage of galaxies, her body a torn vessel, bleeding light into the endless dark. Around her, the war fractured into chaos armies, turning against their creator. Fleets of bone and fire colliding, screams of things that had never been human, echoing across the stars. Betrayal had split the cycle wide open, and the beast that once wore the skin of a dog howled in fury as its dominion unraveled. But even broken, it was not defeated. Its limbs lashed through the void, slicing vessels in half, consuming soldiers whole. From every wound it spilled not blood, but new creatures, birthed screaming and armed, armies regrown from its flesh. For each rebellion that rose, more horrors swarmed forth. It was eternal, unkillable, unless someone severed the cycle entirely. And that someone was Mara. Her veins burned brighter than the stars, her body no longer human, but not fully alien. She was the thread binding the armies together, the wound that both fed and weakened the beast. Every soldier who remembered their stolen humanity looked to her now, not as their weapon, but as their chance. Yet the choice that loomed before her was no victory. She could turn herself fully to the beast's side, embrace the alien power in her blood, and command its armies into absolute dominance. In that future, she would reign not as Mara, but as a god of war one who could scorch worlds to silence and remake the universe in the beast's image. The price was her humanity, her soul. Or she could sever the veins, cut herself free of the alien design, and die as a human bleeding out her light, ending the war by collapsing both armies into dust. Her death would erase the beast, but it would also end every soldier tied to her blood. Billions, freed for a moment, would burn away into nothingness, their rebellion silenced along with the monster they fought. Both paths were soaked in blood, both promised extinction. The beast saw her hesitation and struck. Its mandibles cracked open wider than suns, and it lunged, intending to swallow her whole, to claim the last fragments of her humanity for itself. But the rebels swarmed to defend her, throwing their bodies against its limbs, ripping themselves apart just to give her one more moment. Their blood rained across the void, streaking like meteors, staining her skin until she could no longer tell her wounds from theirs. Her mind split with the weight of their screams. She saw through their eyes mothers dragged from burning villages, fathers crushed under alien claws, children remade into soldiers. Their suffering filled her, drowning her in oceans of pain. And in that flood, the choice sharpened. Two worlds stood before her. One where she ruled, but ruled as the monster's heir. The other where she died, but died human. Her body trembled, the spear of blood reforming in her grip, its point glowing with the fire of 1,000 battles. The rebels roared in unison, their voices a storm of defiance, their eyes locked on her. Even the stars seemed to wait, their burning faces reflected in her blood. And Mara, standing at the center of betrayal, war, and endless night, knew that whichever world she chose would be drowned in blood. The void was silent after the scream. Mara's blood had become light, her veins a constellation, her body stretched between death and ascension. The beast writhed around her, its titanic form unraveling as if pulled apart by invisible hands. Where its flesh split, oceans of black ichor poured into the stars, birthing galaxies of red mist. Every limb that lashed out dissolved into dust. Its howl echoed, half triumph, half despair, as though it knew she had chosen neither its heir nor its enemy, but something in between. She had not severed the bond. She had not surrendered either. Instead, she had bound herself to it in a way the beast never intended, an equal, not a vessel. The rebels saw it first. The rivers of blood that once bound them in chains shifted, burning brighter, turning from crimson to silver. Their bodies no longer collapsed in agony, they steadied. Flesh knitting where wounds had torn, eyes clearing where madness once festered. They were no longer slaves, but free and still alive. But freedom came at a price. Mara's body was broken, her skin cracked and charred by the energy she had forced into herself. Blood spilled from her lips in thick ropes, staining her teeth, yet her eyes glowed with unshakable clarity. At her side, the beast trembled not in rage, but in something close to fear. Its monstrous body shrank, folding inward, bones cracking, wings dissolving. The storm of limbs and claws receded, until, in the silence, it stood once more in the form of the stray dog. But it was no longer pretending. Its eyes, once pits of alien fire, were now mirrors of hers, bloodshot, weary, but alive. The dog, no longer just beast or weapon, staggered forward, its paws slick with the ichor of its fallen self. It pressed against her, its fur matted, its body trembling, and together they stood at the edge of the ruined war. Around them floated the carcasses of worlds, shattered fleets, broken moons, rivers of blood curdling into silence. The war that no one remembered was over, though its scars would never heal. In its place was only her choice, neither extinction nor domination, but survival, scarred and imperfect. Her chest convulsed as she fell to her knees, blood spilling freely now, her vision darkening. The rebels called her name, their voices fractured, desperate but faint in her ears. The dog, her dog pressed closer, its warmth seeping into her fading body. For the first time, she felt not as a weapon, not as a chosen one, but simply human. Human, with something beside her that refused to leave. Her hand, blood-slick and trembling, found its collar. The same collar she had pulled from the stars, the same chain that began it all. With her last strength, she pressed it against its fur. The collar flared, not with alien fire, but with the quiet glow of shared life. Her veins, spilling light into the void, wove into its body, binding them not as master and beast, but as one. The darkness closed around her, but she did not fall alone. When her eyes opened again, there was no void, no battlefield, no broken stars. There was earth beneath her feet. Burnt, scarred earth, but earth nonetheless. Her bloodied fingers brushed against soft fur, and the dog looked up at her. Its gaze neither beast nor alien, but companion. They had survived. Both changed, both scarred, both drenched in the blood of worlds, but alive. And in that silence, at the dawn of whatever world would come next, Mara understood. The dog had not only changed her life, had become her life. Together they stepped forward into a new beginning, haunted, blood-stained, yet bound forever.